Sometimes the person you need most in life is the one you'd never think to look for. Sometimes love finds you in the last place you'd expect, in rough hands, a quiet heart, and a land that asks everything of you. Eleanor Whitmore came to Silver Ridge with her father's money and plans to fix up his old ranch. She hired Caleb Ward, a mountain man, to do the work. He was just a worker. She was just his employer. But the West doesn't care about plans or pride. When trouble came, drought, outlaws, and a fiancé from her old life, everything changed. Could two people from different worlds find something real together? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The stagecoach lurched to a stop in a cloud of dust that seemed to hang in the air like a living thing. Eleanor Whitmore pressed a lace handkerchief to her nose and mouth, her other hand clutching the cameo brooch at her throat. Her mother's brooch, the one piece of jewelry she never removed. Through the coach window, Silver Ridge didn't look like much of a town at all. A single dirt street lined with weathered buildings, their paint peeling under the relentless sun. Mountains rose in the distance, purple and imposing, beautiful in a way that made her chest tighten. This was where her father had spent his final years. This rough, dusty place so far from Boston's cobblestone streets and gaslit boulevards. Miss Whitmore. The driver's weathered face appeared at the window. "This is your stop, ma'am. Silver Ridge." Eleanor gathered her skirts, fine blue silk that already showed the dust of 2 weeks' travel, and accepted the driver's hand as she stepped down. Her boots, polished and proper, touched the packed earth of the frontier town. The air smelled different here. Sage and pine, horse and leather, and something else she couldn't name. Possibility, perhaps. Or warning. "Your trunk, ma'am." The driver hauled her luggage down with a grunt. "You sure you want to stay? Next coach back east comes through in 3 days. "I'm quite sure, thank you." Eleanor's voice carried the refined accent of her upbringing, each word precisely shaped. She pressed a coin into his palm, generous. As her father had taught her to be with working men, the stagecoach rumbled away, leaving her standing alone in front of the Silver Ridge General Store. Several townspeople had stopped to stare. A woman in Eastern finery was clearly an unusual sight. "You must be William Whitmore's daughter." An older woman approached, wiping flour-dusted hands on her apron. Her face was kind but worn, mapped with lines that spoke of hard years and little mercy from the sun. "I'm Martha Crawley. I kept house for your father these last 5 years, Mrs. Crawley." Eleanor felt a wave of relief at finding a familiar name, even if the face was new. "My father wrote of you often. He said you made the best biscuits west of the Mississippi." Martha's eyes softened. "He was a good man, your father. I'm sorry for your loss, child." "We all are." The words settled over Eleanor like a weight. 3 months since the telegram had arrived at her Boston townhouse. 3 months since she'd read the words that changed everything. "Your father passed peacefully in his sleep. The ranch is yours now. The wagon's this way." Martha gestured toward a tired-looking buckboard hitched to an equally tired-looking horse. "It's a fair drive to the ranch, 5 miles up into the hills." As they loaded Eleanor's trunk, a man in a fine suit emerged from the building marked Silver Ridge Bank and Trust. He was perhaps 40, with oiled hair and a smile that showed too many teeth. "Miss Whitmore, I presume." He extended a hand. "Samuel Garrett, president of the town bank? I handled your father's accounts. My condolences on your loss, Mr. Garrett." Eleanor shook his hand briefly. His palm was soft, uncalloused. "A businessman's hand. I hope you'll visit my office soon. There are matters to discuss regarding the ranch. Financial matters that require a woman's," he paused delicately, "careful consideration. I'm certain they do." Eleanor kept her voice pleasant but firm. "I'll call on you once I've settled in." His smile tightened slightly. "Of course. But don't wait too long, Miss Whitmore. These frontier properties can be quite burdensome for someone unaccustomed to such rustic conditions." Martha cleared her throat. "We should be going, miss. Sun'll be setting before long." As they drove out of town, the buildings gave way to open land that stretched endlessly under a sky bigger than any Eleanor had ever seen. The mountains drew closer, and she felt simultaneously smaller and somehow more expansive than she had in years. "He wants you to sell," Martha said quietly, her eyes on the rutted road ahead. "Samuel Garrett. He's been after your father's land for 2 years now. There's water on your property, you see. Good water. Scarce as gold out here. My father never mentioned any pressure to sell. Your father was a stubborn man, proud, maybe too proud." Martha glanced at Eleanor. "The ranch isn't what it once was, miss. I won't lie to you. Years of drought, bad luck with cattle, and your father's health failing, well, the place has gone to seed some." Eleanor's hands tightened on the cameo brooch. Her father's letters had spoken of challenges, yes, but also of hope, of plans to restore the ranch to its former glory, of wanting her to see it, to understand why he'd left Boston all those years ago. She'd been 12 when he'd gone west, following some dream she'd never fully understood. Her mother had refused to leave Boston society, and the marriage had quietly dissolved in the way such things did among people of means. Separate households, polite distance, no scandal. Eleanor had spent summers at the ranch as a girl, wild and free in a way Boston never allowed. Then her mother died, and Eleanor married young, too young, to a man her mother had chosen. A good man, gentle and kind, who died of pneumonia before their second anniversary. Now, at 32, she was engaged again. Charles Beckwith, a successful merchant with political ambitions. A man who looked good on her arm at society functions and never made her heart beat faster. A safe choice, a practical choice, the choice everyone expected her to make. There, Martha pointed ahead, the Whitmore Ranch. Eleanor's breath caught. The house stood against the hillside, 2 stories of weathered wood that had once been painted white. The paint was mostly gone now, stripped by wind and weather. Shutters hung crooked. The porch sagged. Beyond it, she could see a barn with half its roof missing, corrals with broken fences, and what might have once been a garden gone entirely to weeds. But the bones were good. She could see that even from a distance. The house had been built with care, positioned to catch the morning sun and shelter from the worst winds. The land rolled away in gentle slopes, dotted with scrub pine and wild grass that glowed golden in the late afternoon light. And in the distance a line of cottonwoods marked where water ran, or had run once. "It's not as bad as it looks," Martha said. Though her tone suggested it might be worse, Eleanor climbed down from the wagon, her legs stiff from travel. She walked slowly toward the house, and with each step she felt something unexpected, not dismay, but determination. This place held her father's dreams, his sweat and hope, the summers of her childhood when she'd been happy and free. "Show me everything," she said. "I want to see it all." Martha led her through the house. Dust covered everything, thick as felt. Mice had gotten into the pantry. The roof leaked in 3 places, but the stone fireplace was solid. The floors were good oak beneath the grime, and her father's books still lined the shelves in what had been his study. Eleanor picked up a leather-bound volume, Marcus Aurelius, her father's favorite, and opened it. A letter fell out sealed with wax. Her name was written on the front in her father's careful hand. Her fingers trembled as she broke the seal. "My dearest Eleanor, if you're reading this, I've gone on ahead, and the ranch is yours now. I know what people will tell you, that it's too much for a woman alone, that you should sell and return to the easy life back east. Don't listen to them. This land has something Boston never will, the space to become who you truly are, not who society demands you be. I came here broken and found myself whole. I believe you can too. The ranch needs work, good honest work. There's a man in these mountains, Caleb Ward. His grandfather and I were partners once, before pride and foolishness drove us apart. Caleb knows this land like he knows his own soul. If you're going to make a go of it, you'll need him. He won't come easy. He's been alone too long, lost too much. But he's a good man, Eleanor. The kind of man who understands that some things are worth fighting for. Trust the land. Trust yourself. All my love. Father. Eleanor read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and placed it in her pocket next to the cameo brooch. Trust the land, trust yourself, and trust a mountain man named Caleb Ward. Mrs. Crawley, she said, turning to find Martha watching her with knowing eyes. "I need to hire men, good men who can help me restore this place." Martha's weathered face creased with something like approval. "There's men in town who'd work for wages. But if you want someone who knows what this land needs, really needs, there's only one man I'd recommend. Caleb Ward." Martha's eyebrows rose. "Your father mentioned him then?" "He did." Eleanor moved to the window, looking out at the mountains turning purple in the fading light. Somewhere up there, a man lived who held the key to her father's dreams, and possibly her own future. "I'll need to meet him," Eleanor said. "Tomorrow." "He doesn't come to town often," Martha warned. "Keeps to himself up in the high country. Most days you'd have to ride up to find him." "Then that's what I'll do." Martha studied her for a long moment. "You're more like your father than I expected." "That's good. You'll need that stubbornness. This land doesn't give anything freely." That night, Eleanor lay in her father's old bed, listening to unfamiliar sounds. Coyotes singing in the distance, wind rattling the shutters, the vast silence of open space that was nothing like Boston's constant clatter of carriages and voices. She touched her mother's cameo at her throat, feeling the smooth surface worn by years of wear. In her pocket, her father's letter crinkled softly. 2 legacies. 2 different paths her life might take. Tomorrow, she would meet Caleb Ward. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. She closed her eyes and dreamed of mountains, of rough hands building something strong, of becoming someone she didn't yet know she could be. The morning air bit cold and sharp as Eleanor rode into Silver Ridge just after dawn. She'd borrowed Martha's horse, a placid mare named Daisy, who seemed to understand that her rider was more accustomed to carriages than saddles. Every muscle in Eleanor's legs protested the 5-mile journey, but she kept her back straight and her chin high as she guided the horse down the main street. The town was barely stirring. Smoke rose from a few chimneys. A dog barked somewhere. The saloon doors were closed and the general store was just opening. "You're looking for Caleb Ward." It wasn't a question. The shopkeeper, a rail-thin man with spectacles, was sweeping his front step. He'd watched Eleanor dismount with the careful movements of someone unaccustomed to riding. "I am," Eleanor confirmed. "Do you know where I might find him?" The shopkeeper leaned on his broom, considering her with frank curiosity. "Most folks looking for Caleb don't find him unless he wants to be found. But he comes down from the mountains every week or so for supplies. Due in today, actually. What time?" "When he gets here." The man's expression wasn't unkind, just amused at her Eastern expectation of schedules and punctuality. "Could be an hour. Could be noon." "Mountain time runs different than city time, ma'am." Eleanor thanked him and led Daisy to the water trough. She'd wait. She had nowhere else to be, and pride wouldn't let her ride home empty-handed. 2 hours passed. Eleanor sat on the bench outside the general store, watching the town wake up properly. Women in simple calico dresses carried baskets to market. Men gathered outside the blacksmith shop, talking in low voices and glancing her way occasionally. She was a curiosity here, an Eastern lady in riding clothes that probably cost more than most of these people earned in a month. Samuel Garrett emerged from the bank, spotted her and crossed the street with purposeful strides. "Miss Whitmore, I didn't expect to see you in town so soon." He tipped his hat. "I hope everything is satisfactory at the ranch." "Satisfactory is perhaps generous," Eleanor said evenly. "I'm here to hire workers." His smile was patronizing. "I see. Well, good labor is hard to find out here. Most able men are already employed. May I suggest an alternative? I have a buyer interested in the property." "Very interested. He'd pay a fair price, more than fair considering the condition." "I'm not selling, Mr. Garrett." "Miss Whitmore." He sat down beside her uninvited. "Please understand, I have only your best interests at heart. A woman alone on a failing ranch, it's not safe. It's not practical. Why struggle when you could return to Boston with enough money to live comfortably?" "Because it was my father's dream," Eleanor said quietly. "And perhaps mine, too. Dreams don't pay bills. Dreams don't survive drought." His voice hardened slightly. "That ranch will break you, Miss Whitmore. Better to sell now with dignity than wait until you're forced to sell for nothing." Eleanor stood, ending the conversation. "Good day, Mr. Garrett." He rose as well, his jaw tight. "You'll change your mind." They all do. As he walked away, the shopkeeper called out from his doorway. "He's here." Eleanor turned. A man was riding down the main street on a horse that looked like it belonged to the mountains, sturdy, sure-footed, with a coat the color of storm clouds. The rider sat easy in the saddle, moving with the kind of natural grace that spoke of a lifetime on horseback. Caleb Ward. She knew it before anyone said his name. He was tall, lean in the way of men who worked hard and ate simply. His clothes were rough, worn trousers, a dark shirt, a leather vest that had seen better years. A hat shadowed his face, but she could see the dark beard, the strong line of his jaw. He carried himself with a quiet self-possession that had nothing to do with arrogance and everything to do with certainty. He dismounted outside the general store, looped his reins over the hitching post, and only then seemed to notice Eleanor standing there. His eyes, grey as winter sky, took her in with a single glance that felt like an assessment. "Mr. Ward?" Eleanor stepped forward, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor Whitmore. I'd like to speak with you about employment." He looked at her hand for a moment before taking it. His palm was rough with calluses, his grip firm but careful, as if he were aware of his own strength. He released her hand quickly. "Employment." His voice was low, quiet. "Not unfriendly, but not warm either. I need help restoring my father's ranch. The Whitmore place, up in the hills. I'm told you're the best man for the job." Something flickered in his eyes at the mention of her father, but his expression remained neutral. "Told by who?" "My father in a letter. And Mrs. Crawley. Martha's a good woman." He shifted his weight slightly, a man clearly uncomfortable with extended conversation. "But I work alone, Miss Whitmore. Don't take on jobs like that. Why not?" The directness of her question seemed to surprise him. "Got my own place to tend. Don't need the work. Everyone needs work. Mr. Ward, and I pay well." She named a wage that would be generous by frontier standards, perhaps too generous. But desperation had its own economy. "It's not about money." He turned toward the store. "Good luck to you." "Wait." Eleanor followed him. "Please, I rode 5 miles this morning to find you. The least you can do is hear me out." He stopped, turned back. For the first time, she saw something other than cool neutrality in his face, a flicker of what might have been respect, or at least acknowledgement that she had more steel than her silk dress suggested. "You rode from the Whitmore place this morning." He glanced at her hands, where she'd removed her gloves. Her fingers were already blistered from gripping the reins too tightly. "I did. You don't ride much, do you?" "I'm learning." The corner of his mouth might have twitched. It was hard to tell beneath the beard. "Say what you came to say, then." Eleanor took a breath. She could do this. She'd negotiated with Boston merchants, managed a household staff, survived society dinners where every word was a potential trap. A mountain man shouldn't intimidate her. "My father's ranch is in poor condition," she said. "The barn is half collapsed. The fences are broken. I'm told there's a water problem, though I don't yet fully understand it. I need someone who knows the land, who can tell me what's salvageable and what's not. Someone who'll be honest, even if the truth is hard to hear. And you think that's me?" "My father thought so. He said you were a good man, that you understood this land." Caleb's jaw tightened at the mention of her father. "William was—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "I respected your father. But that doesn't mean I'm the right man for this. Then who is? There's men in town who'll either overcharge me because I'm a woman alone, or do half the work and disappear when the money runs out. I need someone I can trust, Mr. Ward. My father trusted you. Your father's dead." The words were blunt, but not cruel. Just honest in the way of men who didn't waste words, softening hard truths. "Yes," Eleanor said quietly. "He is, and this ranch is all I have left of him. I won't let it die too." Something shifted in Caleb's expression. He studied her face, really looked at her, and Eleanor had the strange sense of being seen, not as a wealthy Eastern woman, not as someone's daughter or fiancé, but as herself. "You planning to stay?" he asked. "Or fix it up and sell?" "Stay if I can make it work. Winter's coming." "You ever lived through a mountain winter?" "No." "It'll test you. I imagine it will." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze distant, as if weighing something beyond her understanding. Finally, he reached into his vest pocket and pulled out a worn pocket watch. He opened it, glanced at the time, though Eleanor suspected that wasn't really what he was checking, and closed it again. 1 week, he said. I'll come look at the place, tell you what it needs. After that, you decide if you still want to go through with it, and I'll decide if I want the job. Fair? Fair, Eleanor agreed, relief washing through her. I'll be there tomorrow morning, early. How early? Dawn. He turned back toward the store. Be ready to work, Miss Whitmore. I don't waste time on people who aren't serious. I'm serious, Mr. Ward. He paused at the door, glanced back. We'll see. Eleanor rode home with muscles screaming and hands burning, but with something that felt dangerously like hope taking root in her chest. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. She spent the afternoon preparing, much to Martha's amusement. She changed into the most practical dress she owned, though even that seemed too fine for ranch work. She found an old pair of her father's work gloves in the barn. She studied the property with new eyes, trying to see it as Caleb would see it. The broken fence posts, the overgrown paths, the way the water trough sat dry and cracked. That evening, as the sun set in streams of gold and crimson, Eleanor stood on the sagging porch and looked out at the land. Somewhere up in those mountains, Caleb Ward was watching the same sunset. Tomorrow their worlds would collide. She touched her mother's cameo, then her father's letter in her pocket. 2 legacies. 2 different visions of who she should be. Maybe she could be both. Or maybe she could be something entirely new. Dawn came cold and clear. Eleanor was awake before the sun, dressed in her father's old work shirt, tucked into a simple skirt, boots laced tight, gloves on, despite the blisters. Martha had coffee ready and biscuits hot from the oven. He's a good man, Martha said, handing Eleanor a cup. Quiet but good. Lost his wife and baby girl 5 years back to fever. Hasn't been the same since. Eleanor's chest tightened. I didn't know. Most don't. He doesn't talk about it. Moved up into the mountains after and mostly stays there. Martha's eyes were kind. Just thought you should know. He's not unfriendly. He's grieving. There's a difference. The sound of hoofbeats announced Caleb's arrival precisely at dawn. He rode into the yard and dismounted in one fluid motion, his eyes already scanning the property with the practiced assessment of someone who knew exactly what to look for. Mr. Ward. Eleanor set down her coffee and walked out to meet him. Thank you for coming, he nodded, his attention on the barn. Let's start there. They spent the morning walking the property. Caleb said little, but his silence was different from dismissal. It was concentration. He examined fence posts, studied the ground, tested the strength of the barn's remaining timbers. He walked the creek bed, which was barely a trickle, and crouched down to study the dried mud. Eleanor followed, asking questions when they seemed appropriate, staying quiet when they didn't. She was learning to read him already, the way his jaw tightened when he found something particularly bad, the way his eyes narrowed when he was calculating solutions. By midday, they'd covered most of the property. Martha brought out sandwiches and lemonade, and they sat in the shade of the one tree near the house, an old cottonwood that had survived everything the land had thrown at it. Tell me the truth, Eleanor said. How bad is it? Caleb ate slowly, chewing thoroughly before answering. Bad, he said finally, but not hopeless. What does it need? Everything. He took a drink of lemonade. Barn needs to be torn down and rebuilt. Supporting beams are rotted through. Try to patch it, and you'll just be throwing money away. Fences can be mended, but it'll take time. The well's gone dry, which means you're dependent on the creek, and the creek's running low. My father mentioned water problems in his letters. It's worse than problems. It's crisis. Caleb's eyes were serious. There's drought settling in. Could last years. Without good water, you can't keep cattle, can't keep a garden, can't really keep anything. Eleanor's heart sank. Then it's impossible. I didn't say that. He set down his glass. There's water up in the high country. Good water. A spring that feeds down this way, or used to. Your father and my grandfather found it years ago. Then why isn't it flowing here? Someone diverted it. Probably Pike Drummond. He owns the land adjacent to yours on the north side. Big operation, runs a lot of cattle. He'd have reason to want your water. That's theft. It's frontier justice. Or injustice, depending on where you stand. Caleb stood, brushing crumbs from his hands. The water rights are complicated. Your father had legal claim to that spring, but Pike's got money and influence. He can make things difficult. Can we prove my father's claim? Maybe, if the original survey documents still exist. He looked at her directly. But legal fights cost money, Miss Whitmore. And even if you win, Pike's not the type to accept defeat gracefully. You'd be making an enemy. I already have enemies, apparently. Mr. Garrett made it clear he wants me to fail. Something that might have been approval crossed Caleb's face. Samuel wants everyone to fail so he can buy their land cheap. He's been trying to build an empire out here. So far, most folks are too stubborn to sell. Good, Eleanor said. I'm stubborn too. I'm starting to see that. He moved toward his horse. I'll need to think on this. What you're asking, it's more than repairs. It's a fight. Against the land, against men who don't want you here, against time and money running out. I'm aware. He swung into the saddle with easy grace. I'll come back tomorrow with an answer. Wait, Eleanor stood. You said 1 week. I'm holding you to that. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat. You don't give up easy, do you? No, Mr. Ward, I don't. Call me Caleb. He gathered his reins. If we're going to work together, and that's still an if, we might as well use first names. Eleanor, she offered. He nodded once, then rode away, back toward the mountains that held him like a secret. Martha came out to stand beside Eleanor as they watched him go. Well, he didn't say no. For Caleb Ward, that's practically a yes, Martha smiled. You did good, child. He's not easy to convince. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about water and drought, about legal documents and enemies she hadn't known she'd made, about a man with grey eyes and rough hands who knew how to read the land like a book. The next morning, Caleb returned at dawn. This time, he brought tools. We'll start with the barn, he said, dismounting. It's the most dangerous. Can't have it falling on someone. Does this mean? It means I'm here. He pulled work gloves from his pocket. Now get your gloves, and let's see if you're as stubborn as you claim. Eleanor grabbed her father's old gloves and followed Caleb to the barn. He explained what needed to be done, how they'd need to shore up the safe sections while tearing down the dangerous ones, how they'd salvage what lumber they could and mark the rest for burning. You'll need to hold this beam steady while I cut away the supports, he said, positioning her hands. Keep it straight. If it starts to fall, let it go and get clear. Understand? Understood. They worked in near silence, punctuated only by instructions and the sounds of labor, saw cutting wood, hammer striking nail, the groan of old timber giving way. Eleanor's arms shook with effort, sweat dampened her father's shirt. Her blisters reopened and bled into the gloves. She didn't complain. Around midday, as they paused for water, a sharp crack split the air. The beam Eleanor had been bracing suddenly shifted. Caleb's eyes went wide. Move! But Eleanor's boot had caught on a piece of lumber. She stumbled. The beam swung down in a deadly arc, and everything slowed. She saw the wood coming, knew she couldn't dodge in time, felt the strange calm that comes when there's nothing left to do but accept. Then Caleb hit her like a freight train, tackling her sideways. They crashed to the ground hard, his body covering hers as the beam slammed down exactly where she'd been standing. Dust exploded around them. Something else crashed, a chain reaction of falling timber that sent debris raining down. Then silence. Eleanor lay beneath Caleb, her face pressed against his chest, his arms locked around her. She could hear his heart thundering, feel the tension in every muscle. Dust settled slowly around them. You hurt? His voice was rough, urgent. I don't think so. She was breathless, stunned. You? I'm fine. But he didn't move immediately. For a moment, they lay there in the wreckage. Two people who'd been strangers yesterday, now tangled together with Eleanor's life saved by his quick reaction. Finally, Caleb pushed himself up, helped her to her feet. His hands were gentle but firm, checking her arms, her shoulders, looking for injury. You're bleeding. Eleanor looked down. Her palms had torn open when she'd fallen, dirt and blood mixing with the old blisters. "It's nothing." "It's not nothing." His jaw was tight. "That beam could have killed you, but it didn't, because of you." She met his eyes. "Thank you." He held her gaze for a moment, something complicated moving behind those gray eyes. Then he looked away, releasing her. "We need to be more careful. This work, it's dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." "Then teach me, Eleanor, teach me," she repeated. "I need to understand this place. How it works, what it needs, how to keep it alive." "I can't do that if you just do everything while I watch." Caleb ran a hand through his dark hair, clearly frustrated. "You're going to get yourself killed, or I'm going to learn how to survive here." She picked up a piece of fallen timber, examined it. "Which can we salvage?" He stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You really are stubborn. I prefer determined." "Stubborn," he repeated. But this time, it didn't sound like a criticism. They went back to work, but something had shifted. Caleb began explaining more, showing her how to read the strength of wood by its grain, how to test a joint, how to position her body to use leverage instead of just muscle. Eleanor listened, learned, her hands bleeding and her muscles screaming, but her determination only hardening as the sun began to set. Painting the mountains in shades of fire, Caleb packed up his tools. "Tomorrow," he said. "Same time. You'll come back?" "I'm here now, aren't I?" He swung into his saddle. "Get Martha to tend those hands properly." "And Eleanor?" "Yes?" "Your father was right about you. You've got the kind of stubborn this land respects." He rode away before she could respond, disappearing into the lengthening shadows as the mountains swallowed him whole. Eleanor stood in the ruined barn, her hands throbbing, her body exhausted, dust coating every inch of her. She'd nearly died today. She'd been saved by a man who still barely spoke to her. The work ahead was impossible, the enemies were real, and winter was coming. She'd never felt more alive. The days fell into a rhythm as natural as breathing. Caleb arrived at dawn, worked until the light began to fail, then disappeared back into the mountains. Eleanor learned to wake with the sun, to have coffee ready when she heard his horse, to be dressed and prepared for whatever task he deemed most urgent. They spoke little at first. Caleb wasn't a man who filled silence with idle chatter, and Eleanor found herself respecting that. Words mattered more when they were scarce. Instructions were given once, clearly, and he expected her to remember. She did. Her hands, once soft and carefully tended, transformed. The blisters hardened into calluses. Her arms, unused to physical labor, strengthened. She learned to lift with her legs, to pace herself through the day, to drink water before she felt thirsty. Small wisdoms of survival that no finishing school had ever taught. Martha watched the transformation with quiet approval. "You're becoming a frontier woman," she said one evening, applying salve to Eleanor's sunburned neck. "Your father would be proud." Eleanor wasn't sure what she was becoming. She only knew that when she collapsed into bed each night, too exhausted to even remove her boots, she slept deeply and without dreams. No anxiety about social obligations, no worries about saying the wrong thing at dinner parties, no careful navigation of Boston's complex social hierarchies. Just honest exhaustion from honest work. By the end of the first week, they'd cleared most of the dangerous debris from the barn. Caleb had marked which timbers could be salvaged and which needed to be burned. The pile for burning was significantly larger. "We'll need to order lumber from town," he said, making notes in a small leather journal he carried. "Cost you, but there's no way around it." "How much?" He named a figure that made Eleanor's stomach clench, but she nodded. Her father had left her enough money to attempt this, though not enough to fail more than once. Every decision mattered. "There's something else," Caleb said, looking toward the dry creek bed. "The water situation. We need to address it soon. What do you suggest?" "We ride up to the spring. See what we're dealing with." He glanced at her. "It's a full day's ride. Rough country. You up for it?" Eleanor thought of her aching muscles, her still healing hands. "When do we leave?" "Tomorrow dawn." That evening, Eleanor prepared for the journey. Martha packed food, checked Eleanor's boots, and insisted she take an extra shawl. Gets cold up in the high country, she warned. Even in late summer, Eleanor also took time to explore her father's study more thoroughly. She'd been avoiding it, not ready to face the full weight of his absence. But now she needed to find those survey documents Caleb had mentioned. The desk was cluttered with papers, bills, letters, notes about cattle and weather and crops that never came. She sorted through them systematically, and that's when she found it, a leather tube tucked behind a row of books. Inside was a rolled map, hand-drawn and carefully detailed. Her father's handwriting covered the margins. Notes about water flow, elevation markers, property boundaries. And there, in the northwest corner, a star-marked spring, original survey 1858, Whitmore Ward claim. Ward, Caleb's family name. Eleanor studied the map more closely. The boundary lines were precise, the water rights clearly marked. But there was something else, a note in her father's hand that made her pause. John Ward, partner and friend. May his grandson find peace that I could not give him. She sat back, mind racing. Partners. Her father and Caleb's grandfather had been partners, not just neighbors. What had happened between them? And what did Caleb know about it? She rolled the map carefully, slipped it back into its tube. Tomorrow, she'd ask him. Sleep came hard that night. Eleanor lay awake, thinking about the journey ahead, about water and rights and claims that predated her arrival. About a man who spoke in silence and carried grief like a second skin. Dawn came gray and cool, threatening rain. Caleb arrived leading a second horse, not Martha's placid Daisy, but a taller, stronger animal with intelligent eyes. "This is Ash," he said. "He's steady on mountain trails. Can you manage him?" Eleanor approached the horse slowly, let him smell her hand before stroking his neck. "We'll manage each other." Caleb's mouth quirked, that almost smile she was learning to recognize. "You're learning. Let's see if you can keep your seat." They rode out as the sun broke through the clouds, heading north and west toward the mountains. The land changed gradually at first, the gentle rolls giving way to steeper climbs, the scrub grass replaced by pine and aspen. The air grew thinner, cleaner, scented with resin and wildflowers Eleanor couldn't name. Caleb led without looking back, trusting her to follow. But his pace was measured, mindful of her still developing skills. When they reached a rocky stretch, he dismounted and showed her how to lead Ash over the treacherous footing. "A lame horse up here can mean death," he explained. "Take your time. Be sure of every step." They stopped at midday by a small stream, not the creek that ran through her property, but a different waterway, swift and clear. Caleb let the horses drink while Eleanor unpacked the food Martha had prepared. "I found a map," she said, handing him a biscuit. "In my father's study. It showed a spring marked Whitmore Ward claim." Caleb went still, the biscuit halfway to his mouth. "He kept that map. You knew about it?" "My grandfather's copy burned in a fire years ago. I assumed your father's was lost too." He set the biscuit down, untouched. "What else did it show?" "Water rights. Property boundaries. And a note about your grandfather." She watched his face carefully. "They were partners." "They were." Caleb's jaw tightened. "Until they weren't. What happened?" He was silent for so long Eleanor thought he wouldn't answer. Then pride, stubbornness, the usual things that break partnerships. He stood, moved to check Ash's saddle. "My grandfather wanted to sell part of the land to raise money for improvements. Your father refused, said it would compromise their independence. They argued. Eventually they split the partnership. Your father took the ranch, my grandfather took the mountain property and some cattle. But the water rights were supposed to be shared. Both properties needed that spring." He tightened a strap with more force than necessary. "But after the split they barely spoke. My grandfather died angry, your father died alone. And here we are, trying to fix what they broke." Eleanor absorbed this, understanding now why Caleb had been reluctant to help. She represented not just her father's legacy, but old wounds that had never healed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, "for whatever pain our fathers caused each other. For whatever part my family played in that." Caleb looked at her, really looked at her, and something in his expression softened. "You're not your father, Eleanor, any more than I'm mine. Maybe we can do better. I'd like to try. He nodded once, then turned back to his horse. We should keep moving. Spring's still 2 hours ahead. They rode higher into the mountains, into country so beautiful it made Eleanor's chest ache. Meadows of wildflowers stretched between stands of pine. Eagles circled overhead. Once they saw a small herd of elk moving through a distant valley, graceful as dancers. I forget, Eleanor said softly, that places like this exist, that beauty this pure is possible. Caleb glanced back at her. It's why I stay up here, why I couldn't leave, even after... He stopped himself. After you lost your family, Eleanor finished gently. Martha told me. I'm sorry, Caleb. His shoulders tensed, and for a moment she thought she'd overstepped. But then he spoke, his voice rough. Her name was Sarah. Our daughter was Anna. She'd be 6 now if fever hadn't taken them both in a single week. I can't imagine that pain. Hope you never do. He was quiet for a moment. This land, it holds them for me in a way. I see Sarah in the wildflowers she loved. Hear Anna in the creek water. If I left, I'd lose them all over again. Eleanor's throat tightened. Thank you for telling me. He didn't respond, just urged his horse forward, but she understood. That had cost him something, that sharing. She'd honor it by not pressing for more. The spring revealed itself gradually, first as a sound, water moving over stone, then as a glimpse of green, more vivid than the surrounding forest. Finally, as a clearing where water bubbled up from the ground, clear and cold, forming a pool before flowing downward in 3 directions. Caleb dismounted, knelt by the pool, and cupped his hands to drink. Eleanor did the same. The water was so cold it made her teeth ache, so clean it tasted of stone and sky. This is it, Caleb said. The source. Your creek should be getting most of this flow. He stood, walked the perimeter of the pool, studying the ground. His face grew darker with each step. What is it? Someone's been here, recently. He pointed to where the earth had been disturbed, where rocks had been repositioned. They've diverted the main flow north and east. Toward Drummond Land. Eleanor felt anger kindle in her chest. Can we prove it was Pike? Doesn't matter who did it. What matters is fixing it. Caleb studied the diversion, calculating. We could tear this out, redirect the water back to your property, but the moment we do, Pike will know. And he won't take it quietly. So what do? We make a choice. He turned to face her, his expression serious. We can let this go, try to make do with what water you've got. You might survive a year, maybe 2, or we can fight for what's legally yours. But understand, that fight won't be pretty. Pike Drummond doesn't lose gracefully. Eleanor thought of her father's letter. Trust the land. Trust yourself. She thought of the ranch, dying of thirst, of the life she was building, so different from the one she'd left behind. We fight, she said. It's our water. My father's claim is legal. Caleb studied her for a long moment. You're sure? I'm sure. All right then. He pulled work gloves from his saddlebag. Let's at least look at what we're dealing with. We won't change anything today. Not smart to work without backup. But we can plan. They spent the next hour examining the diversion, with Caleb explaining how the water had been redirected, what it would take to restore the original flow, where the vulnerable points were. Eleanor listened, asked questions, and tried to memorize details that might matter later. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, they prepared to leave. We'll need to file a formal complaint with the territorial authority, Caleb said, as they mounted their horses. Get the legal side documented before we take physical action. That map you found, it'll be crucial. I'll bring it to the lawyer in town. Better bring it to Denver. The town lawyer is Samuel Garrett's cousin. You won't get fair treatment there. Eleanor hadn't known that. How many other connections and complications existed in this small community? How many ways could she fail without knowing all the invisible rules? As if reading her thoughts, Caleb said, You're learning, Eleanor. Every day you're learning. That's what matters. The ride back was quieter, both of them lost in thought. The path seemed different in the fading light, more mysterious, the shadows deeper. When they emerged from the mountain trail back onto ranch property, full darkness had fallen, and Martha had lit lamps in the windows. Caleb helped Eleanor dismount, his hands steadying her when her stiff legs nearly buckled. You did well today, he said. That's rough country for an experienced rider, let alone someone still learning. I had a good teacher. He unsaddled Ash, tended both horses with practiced efficiency. Eleanor wanted to help but could barely move, her body one solid ache. "Go inside," Caleb said. "Get warm. I'll finish up here. Will you—" She hesitated. "Would you stay for supper? Martha always makes extra." He paused in brushing down his horse. "Wouldn't be proper. Since when do we care about proper?" Eleanor smiled tiredly. "We've spent entire days alone together. A meal with Martha as chaperone seems almost conventional by comparison." That almost smile again. "When you put it that way." Martha seemed unsurprised when Eleanor appeared with Caleb behind her. She simply set another place at the table and ladled out stew while Eleanor collapsed into a chair, too exhausted to be embarrassed by her disheveled state. Over the meal, they told Martha about the spring, the diversion, the plan to seek legal help. Martha listened, her weathered face thoughtful. "Pike Drummond won't like that," she said finally. "He's used to getting his way. Got money, got men who'll do what he says. Do you think we're making a mistake?" Eleanor asked. "I think you're doing what's right. That's not the same as easy, but it's still what needs doing." Martha refilled their coffee cups. "Your father would approve. He was never one to back down from bullies." After the meal, Caleb rose to leave. Eleanor walked him to the porch, where his horse waited patiently. "Thank you," she said, "for today, for showing me the spring, for everything. You thanked me already, I know, but it bears repeating." She wrapped her shawl tighter against the cool night air. "Caleb, about what you told me. About Sarah and Anna, I won't speak of it to anyone. I promise." He looked at her in the darkness, his face half-shadowed. "I know you won't. That's why I told you." He mounted his horse, then paused. From his vest pocket, he pulled out a small object and held it out to her. "The worn pocket watch. This was my grandfather's," he said. "He gave it to me before he died. Made me promise to remember that time matters. Not clock time, but the time we have with people we care about. That grudges and pride steal that time away." Eleanor took the watch carefully, felt its weight, its warmth from being carried close to his body. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I don't want to repeat his mistakes. Or your father's." He gathered his reins. "What we're starting here, restoring the ranch, fighting for the water, it's not just about land and property. It's about fixing what they broke. Making something better. A partnership," Eleanor said softly, understanding. "Not just employer and worker. Real partners, like they should have been." "If you're willing," Eleanor handed the watch back, their fingers touching briefly in the exchange. "I'm willing," he nodded, pocketed the watch and rode off into the darkness, leaving Eleanor standing on the porch with her heart beating strangely fast. Martha appeared in the doorway. "That's a good man." "I'm beginning to see that," Eleanor admitted. "He's been alone too long. Forgotten what it means to have someone to work alongside, someone to care about." Martha's eyes were knowing. "You're good for him, child, whether either of you realizes it yet or not." Eleanor wanted to protest that they were just business partners, that whatever was growing between them was simply mutual respect, born of shared purpose. But Martha had already disappeared back inside, and Eleanor was left alone with the night and thoughts she wasn't ready to examine too closely. She touched her mother's cameo at her throat, then the pocket where she kept her father's letter. Two different paths, two different lives. But maybe there was a third option she'd never considered, a life she could build herself. Here on this harsh and beautiful land, with a man who understood both grief and hope, who saw her not as society's creation, but as herself. The thought was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. Eleanor went inside, banked the fire and climbed the stairs to her room. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more small steps toward whatever future was waiting. She fell asleep thinking of cold spring water, of wildflowers in meadows, of grey eyes that held winter sky and the promise of thaw. The water arrived 3 days later, a trickle at first, then a steady flow that brought the creek back to life. Eleanor stood at its banks and watched it run, clear and cold and precious. She knelt down, cupped her hands and drank deeply, tasting victory and hope. Caleb found her there, his face troubled despite the success. Pike sent a message. he said without preamble. Through Jack Morrison. He knows it was us. What did he say? That he's filing a counterclaim to the water rights, and that we should expect consequences for our trespassing on disputed territory. Eleanor stood, brushing dirt from her knees. Let him file his claim. We have the original survey. We have the law on our side. Law doesn't matter much if Pike decides to take matters into his own hands. Then we'll deal with that when it comes. She met his eyes. We did the right thing, Caleb. We're not going to let him intimidate us now. But intimidation came anyway, in small ways that added up. Fences were cut in the night. Cattle wandered off and had to be rounded up. Supplies ordered from town arrived damaged or not at all. Samuel Garrett made it known that extending credit to Eleanor Whitmore was a questionable risk. Through it all, Eleanor and Caleb worked. They finished clearing the barn site and began the rebuild, slow, painstaking work that would take most of the summer. They repaired fences faster than they were cut. They moved the cattle to safer pastures and took turns watching them at night. The partnership between them deepened with each shared challenge. Caleb began to tell her stories of his life before, about Sarah, about the daughter who'd loved wildflowers and horses, about the cabin he'd built in the mountains to escape the memories that haunted the valleys below. I should show you the cabin sometime, he said one evening as they worked on the barn frame. It's where I really live. This coming down to the ranch every day, it's the longest I've been around people in years. Do you miss the solitude? He paused, considering the question honestly. Yes and no. I miss the quiet. Don't miss the loneliness, though. Didn't even realize how lonely I was until... He stopped himself. Until what? Until you arrived and reminded me what it's like to have someone to talk to work beside. He shook his head. Never mind. Hand me that hammer. But Eleanor understood what he wasn't saying, because she felt it too. The ease that had grown between them. The way silence was comfortable instead of awkward. The way they moved around each other with unconscious choreography, anticipating needs and offering help before it was asked. She thought about that conversation 3 days later when Caleb invited her to ride up to his cabin. You should see where I live, he said. Understand the full picture of the land and how the water flows from high country down to the ranch. The ride took most of the morning. They climbed higher than Eleanor had been, even to reach the spring, into country where the air was so thin it made her dizzy, where the trees grew twisted by wind, where the silence was so complete it felt holy. The cabin sat in a small clearing, surrounded by pine and aspen, with a view that stretched for miles. It was small but well built, with a stone chimney and sturdy walls, simple, honest, like the man who'd made it. I built it all myself, Caleb said, dismounting. Took 2 years. Some days I thought I'd never finish. Inside the cabin was spare but not austere. A bed in one corner neatly made. A table and 2 chairs he'd clearly crafted himself. Shelves with books, more than Eleanor had expected. A fireplace with cooking implements hung carefully on hooks, and on a small shelf near the window, a wooden horse no bigger than Eleanor's hand, carved with such care that she could see individual strands of mane. The delicate legs, the flowing tail. May I? She asked, reaching for it. Caleb nodded, his jaw tight. Eleanor picked up the horse carefully, cradling it in her palm. It was warm from sunlight through the window, smooth from years of handling. She could feel the love carved into every detail. A father's love for a daughter who would never grow old enough to ride a real horse. It's beautiful, she whispered. She must have loved it, she did. Carried it everywhere. Caleb's voice was rough. After they died, I couldn't look at it. Packed it away for 3 years. Then one day I took it out again, and it didn't hurt as much. Still hurts, but differently. Like remembering, instead of bleeding. Eleanor set the horse back on its shelf with infinite care. Thank you for showing me, for trusting me with this. He moved to the window, looking out at the mountains. You're the first person who's been here. Since. I'm honored. They stood in silence for a moment, the cabin holding them in its simple peace. Then Caleb turned back to her. Eleanor, I need to tell you something. About the water rights, about the partnership between our families. What is it? The original survey, the one your father kept, it shows something that most people don't know." He pulled out the leather journal he always carried, opened it to a page of notes. The spring and water rights were jointly owned. Equal shares. Whitmore Ward, together. I saw that on the map. What you didn't see is that when they split the partnership, they never legally dissolved the water rights portion. It was supposed to be done, filed with the territorial office, but neither one followed through. They were both too angry, too proud. Eleanor's mind raced ahead. Which means legally you own half the spring and I own the other half. The ranch can't function without my cooperation, and my land up here can't function without yours. We're bound together whether we like it or not. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because I didn't want you to think I was trying to claim something that felt like it should be all yours. Your father left you the ranch. I didn't want to complicate that. He met her eyes. But with Pike pushing, with lawyers getting involved, you need to know the full truth. We're legal partners in the water rights, Eleanor. Have been all along, whether we knew it or not. Eleanor moved to the table, sat down, processing this information. So when I fight for the water, I'm fighting for both of us. Yes, and when I help you restore the ranch, I'm protecting my own interests too. Is that the only reason you're helping? The question hung in the air between them. Caleb sat across from her, his hands flat on the table, close enough to touch but not touching. "No," he said finally. "That's not the only reason." "Not anymore." Eleanor's heart beat faster. "Then what are the other reasons?" "I think you know." "I want to hear you say it." He was quiet for a long moment, his grey eyes searching her face. "Because working beside you reminds me what it's like to be alive instead of just surviving. Because you look at this land the way Sarah did, seeing beauty where others see only hardship. Because you're stubborn and brave, and you don't quit even when you should." He paused. "Because somewhere along the way this stopped being about land and water and started being about you." Eleanor's breath caught. "Caleb, I know you're engaged. I know you have a life back east that doesn't include mountain men and failing ranches. I'm not asking you for anything, Eleanor. I just needed you to know the truth. About the water rights and the rest of it." She reached across the table, covered his hand with hers. His fingers were rough, warm, familiar now. "The rest of it isn't one-sided. It can't work. You know that. I know what people would say. I don't know if that means it can't work." He turned his hand palm up, laced his fingers through hers. They sat like that, connected across the rough wood of the table, while sunlight streamed through the window and illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air. "Charles arrives next week," Eleanor said softly. "I know. I should tell him. I need to—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You need to be sure." Caleb squeezed her hand gently, then released it. "Before you make any decisions, you need to be absolutely sure. This life out here, it's not easy. Winter is brutal. The work never ends. There's no society, no culture, no comfortable life like you had in Boston. I'm not that person anymore. The woman who needs those things, maybe not. But you should make sure before you burn bridges you can't rebuild." They rode back to the ranch in thoughtful silence. At the boundary of her property, Caleb reined in his horse. "I won't come down for a few days," he said. "Give you time to think, to figure out what you want without me complicating things. You don't complicate things. Yes, I do. And you know it." He touched his hat brim. "Whatever you decide, Eleanor, about Charles, about Boston, about all of it, I'll understand. No hard feelings, no regrets." He rode away before she could respond, disappearing into the trees like smoke. That evening, Martha found Eleanor on the porch, staring at nothing. "He told you about the water rights," Martha said. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" "Because I've known Caleb since he was a boy. Knew his grandfather. Knew the whole mess with your father. Been waiting for someone to finally speak the truth out loud. Why didn't anyone tell me before?" "Because it wasn't our truth to tell. Had to come from him." Martha sat down beside her. "Your young man arrives in 3 days. He's not my young man." "Not really. He's a promise I made when I didn't know who I was or what I wanted. And now you do know." Eleanor thought of cold spring water and wildflowers pressed in books, of rough hands gentle against hers, of a life built in partnership and hard work and honest connection. I'm beginning to, she said. The next 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Eleanor cleaned the house, prepared the guest room, tried to remember how to be the woman Charles expected. Refined, mannered, suitable. But when she put on her finest dress, the silk felt foreign against her sun-toughened skin. When she styled her hair in the elaborate fashion she'd once favored, it seemed foolish and impractical. She took it down, braided it simply, and that felt more true. Charles arrived in a hired carriage from town, bringing trunks of gifts and expectations. He was exactly as Eleanor remembered, handsome in a conventional way, well-dressed, with the confidence of a man who'd never questioned his place in the world. Eleanor, he took her hands, kissed her cheek with appropriate restraint. My dear, you look different. The frontier changes a person. Yes, I can see that. His tone suggested it wasn't entirely a compliment. He glanced around at the ranch, the partially rebuilt barn, the simple house, the endless work still visible everywhere. You've been living here alone? With Mrs. Crawley as housekeeper and companion. I see. He didn't see, not really. Well, we can discuss all that inside. I have much to tell you about Boston. The wedding plans are coming along wonderfully. Charles, Eleanor stopped him gently. Before we go further, we need to talk. Of course. That's why I've come, to bring you home and finalize our arrangements. Eleanor looked past him to the mountains, thinking of a cabin in the high country, of a man who'd learned to live with grief, of water flowing where it should, and work that mattered. Yes, she said quietly, we definitely need to talk. They spent the afternoon at the cabin, talking about the future in careful, hopeful terms. Caleb made coffee, while Eleanor studied his small collection of books, philosophy, poetry, practical guides to animal husbandry, and weather prediction. A man who valued knowledge, even in isolation. We'll need to make things legal, Caleb said, handing her a cup. The water rights situation. If we're doing this together, really together, we should document the partnership properly. Agreed. I'll take the survey map to Denver next week. Get everything filed correctly this time. I should come with you. 2 days' ride each way. Not safe for you to travel alone, Eleanor smiled. I've gotten tougher since I arrived. I know. Doesn't mean I want you taking unnecessary risks. He sat beside her at the small table. There's something else we need to discuss. About the ranch, about my land up here, about how we combine them into something that works. I've been thinking about that too. Your land has the high pastures, good timber. Mine has the lower fields, better access to town. Together they make sense in a way neither does alone. He traced patterns on the worn wood. My grandfather and your father should have figured that out, instead of letting pride tear them apart. We won't make their mistakes. No, he agreed. We won't. They rode back to the ranch as evening fell, arriving to find Martha on the porch, looking worried. Jack Morrison was here, she said immediately. Pike's men cut 3 sections of fence last night. Scattered the cattle. Jack helped round them up, but he says Pike's getting bolder. Says we should expect worse. Caleb's expression darkened. He's trying to force you out before the legal claim gets filed. Make it impossible to keep operating. Then we file sooner. I'll leave for Denver tomorrow. Eleanor, no arguments. The sooner we have legal documentation, the better our position. She turned to Martha. Can you manage here for 4 days? I've managed worse. But you're not traveling alone. I'm going with her, Caleb said firmly. Already planned it. They left at dawn the next morning, supplies packed, both armed. The ride to Denver would take 2 full days of hard travel, and they'd need to camp 1 night on the trail. Eleanor felt a flutter of nervousness, not about the journey, but about the intimacy of extended time alone together, now that everything between them had changed. The first day passed in steady riding, punctuated by Caleb's teaching. He showed her how to read trail signs, how to choose safe camping spots, how to move quietly through country where they might not be the only travelers. Pike might send men to follow us, he explained. He'll want to know what we're doing, where we're going. We need to be alert. They made camp that evening in a sheltered hollow with good sightlines and access to water. Caleb built a small fire while Eleanor tended the horses. The domestic choreography felt natural now, comfortable. Over dinner, salted meat and hard biscuits washed down with creek water, they talked about plans for the ranch, how they'd integrate the properties, where they'd focus rebuilding efforts, what the winter would require. "We should marry before winter," Caleb said quietly, staring into the fire. "Not because it's expected, but because it makes the legal situation cleaner. The property rights, the partnership, everything's simpler if we're married." Eleanor's heart beat faster. "Is that a proposal?" "Not a very good one." He looked at her, firelight playing across his features. "I'm not good with words, Eleanor. Not good with romance or pretty speeches. But I'm asking, will you marry me? Build this life together, face whatever comes as partners in everything." "Yes." The word came without hesitation. "Yes, I'll marry you." He pulled something from his pocket, a simple gold band, worn smooth with age. "This was my grandmother's. My grandfather gave it to her when they homesteaded here. It's not fancy, it's perfect." Eleanor held out her hand, and Caleb slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if made for her. They sat close to the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist, watching the stars emerge in the vast sky. Eleanor had never felt more certain of anything in her life. They reached Denver late the following afternoon. The territorial office was closed, but they found a hotel, taking separate rooms, despite Caleb's clear discomfort with the expense. "We'll be married soon enough," Eleanor said. "A few more nights of propriety won't kill us." The next morning they met with Harrison Brooks, the lawyer Eleanor had corresponded with. He was a careful man in his 50s, with sharp eyes and meticulous manners. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Ward." He shook their hands, invited them into his office. "I'm glad you brought the original survey map. May I see it?" Eleanor handed over the leather tube. Brooks unrolled the map carefully, studied it through magnifying spectacles, making small sounds of interest. "This is excellent documentation. Very clear. And the notations, both family names on the water rights claim." He looked up. "You're aware this creates a joint ownership situation?" "We are," Caleb said. "That's what we want to formalize." "I see. And your relationship is—" "We're engaged," Eleanor said. "Planning to marry within the month," Brooks smiled. "That does simplify matters. Once you're married, the properties can be combined more easily." He made notes. "However, there's something here you should know about." Eleanor and Caleb exchanged glances. "What is it?" Brooks pulled out a larger map of the territorial survey. "I've been researching Pike Drummond's claim to the water. His property boundaries are here," he indicated with a finger, "and your combined properties are here. Based on this original survey, the spring sits entirely on Whitmore Ward land. Drummond's claim is completely without merit." "That's good news," Eleanor said. "Yes and no." Brooks' expression grew serious. "The problem is that Drummond has been using that water for years, making improvements based on access to it, investing significant capital under the assumption he had rights to it. When we file this claim and he loses access, he loses a substantial investment. That's not our problem," Caleb said. "Legally, no. But practically, men like Drummond don't accept losses gracefully. Especially not when those losses affect their bottom line." Brooks leaned back in his chair. "I can file this claim. It's valid and will hold up in any territorial court. But you should understand what you're inviting. Drummond will fight back, and he won't limit himself to legal channels." Eleanor felt a chill. "You think he'll retaliate?" "I think it's very likely. Fence cutting and cattle scattering are minor harassments. If he truly feels threatened, he may escalate to violence." "We can handle Pike Drummond," Caleb said quietly. Brooks studied him. "I don't doubt your courage, Mr. Ward, but courage and capacity are different things. Drummond employs a dozen men, some of whom are, let's say, experienced in discouraging competition. You're just two people trying to run a ranch." "We have friends," Eleanor said. "People who've suffered under Pike's intimidation. They'll stand with us, perhaps. Or perhaps they'll decide their own survival is more important than your fight." Brooks softened his tone. "I'm not trying to discourage you. I'm making sure you understand the full picture before I file these papers." Eleanor looked at Caleb. He met her eyes, and she saw her own determination reflected there. "File the papers," she said. "We're not backing down." Brooks nodded. Very well. I'll need 3 days to prepare the full documentation and file with the territorial office. There'll be a fee. He named an amount that made Eleanor wince, but not refuse. They spent those 3 days in Denver, using the time to purchase supplies, arrange for lumber delivery, and at Caleb's quiet insistence, visit the church to speak with the minister about a wedding. The minister was a practical man who'd married many frontier couples under various circumstances. He asked few questions and agreed to perform a ceremony when they returned with proper witnesses. On their final evening in Denver, Eleanor and Caleb walked through the city streets. It was so different from the mountains. Noisy, crowded, full of gaslight and commerce and human density. Eleanor had once found this comforting. Now it felt overwhelming. Do you miss it? Caleb asked. City life? Parts of it. Theatre, libraries, good restaurants. She smiled. But not enough to go back. What we're building, it matters more, even if it's dangerous, even if we might lose. And we won't lose. She said it with conviction she truly felt. We're fighting for what's right, what's ours. That counts for something. They returned to collect the filed papers from Brooks, who handed them over with final warnings and genuine good wishes. You're brave people, he said. I hope that's enough. The ride home took 2 days, during which Eleanor and Caleb discussed strategy, how to fortify the ranch, who to ask for support, what Pike's likely responses would be. They arrived home just before sunset to find Martha waiting with news that drained the blood from Eleanor's face. Pike's men came yesterday, Martha said, her voice shaking. They threatened me, said to tell you that you had 1 week to sell and leave. Then they... She gestured toward the barn. Eleanor and Caleb rushed to look. Someone had painted words across the rebuilt barn in crude red letters, "Leave or burn." Did they hurt you? Eleanor gripped Martha's shoulders. No, just scared me. But Eleanor, that's not all. Martha led them to the house. The door had been forced open, the inside ransacked. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered, furniture overturned. They were looking for something, Caleb said, surveying the damage. The survey map, which is safely filed in Denver now, Eleanor said. They're too late. They don't know that. Caleb's expression was grim. When they figure it out, when they realize we've already filed the claim, they'll escalate, Eleanor finished. She moved through the ruined house, feeling violation and anger in equal measure. This was her home, her father's house, her sanctuary, and Pike Drummond's men had invaded it with impunity. We need help, Caleb said. Can't defend this place with just us and Martha. We need men, supplies, a real plan. Jack Morrison, Eleanor said immediately, and whoever else he trusts. We need to call in every favor, every friendship. That night they worked to restore some order to the house while formulating strategy. Caleb rode out to contact Jack and other neighboring ranchers who'd suffered under Pike's intimidation. Eleanor took inventory of their supplies, weapons, and resources. By the time Caleb returned near midnight, Eleanor had made lists and calculations. They had enough ammunition for a prolonged defense, enough food for perhaps 2 weeks if they rationed carefully, enough water now that the creek flowed. Jack will come, Caleb reported, bringing Tom and 3 other men he trusts. They'll arrive tomorrow, a few others. They want to help, but they're scared of Pike's retaliation. I don't blame them, Eleanor said. We're asking them to risk everything. No different than what we're risking. He studied her face in the lamplight. You can still walk away from this. Take the money Pike's offering through Samuel Garrett. Go back to Denver or Boston. Start fresh somewhere safe, and leave you here alone. I've been alone before. That's not happening. Eleanor moved to stand in front of him. We're partners, remember? In everything. That means we face this together. He pulled her close, held her tight. She could feel his heart beating against hers, could feel the tension in his body, the fear he wouldn't voice. I can't lose you, he whispered into her hair. Can't lose someone else I love. You love me? The words were soft, wondering. God help me, I do. Probably loved you from the moment you refused to give up, even when you should have. He pulled back to look at her. I know it's too soon. No, we haven't had enough time. I love you too, Eleanor interrupted. And we have exactly the time we have. No guarantees of more, but that's true for everyone, isn't it? He kissed her, deep and claiming, and Eleanor felt the truth of it settle into her bones. Whatever happened next, they'd face it together. That had to be enough. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. A wagon arrived from town, driven by a woman Eleanor didn't recognize. She was perhaps 40, dressed practically, with the capable air of someone used to hard work. "I'm Margaret Chen," she said, climbing down from the wagon. "My husband and I own the mercantile in town. We've heard what Pike's been doing, and we're tired of watching him intimidate good people." The wagon was loaded with supplies, food, ammunition, medical supplies, blankets. "We can't pay for all this," Eleanor protested. "Didn't ask you to. Consider it an investment in seeing Pike Drummond taken down a notch." Margaret smiled. "Besides, your father was always fair with us, always paid his debts. This is us returning the favor." More people arrived throughout the day. Jack Morrison and his promised men. A widow named Sarah Hendricks, who brought preserves and sharp shooting skills. 2 brothers who ranched to the south and had their own grievances with Pike. By sunset, they had 10 people willing to stand with them. That evening, they gathered around a large table, the first real council of war. Caleb spread out a hand-drawn map of the ranch and surrounding properties. "Pike has more men and more resources," he said bluntly. "We can't win a straight fight. We need to be smarter, use the land, make it costly for him to attack." They planned through the night. Defensive positions, watch rotations, contingency plans. Eleanor contributed her organizational skills, her ability to see logistics and supply chains. Caleb contributed his knowledge of terrain and tactics, together with Jack's frontier experience and the others' local knowledge. They built a strategy that might, just might, work, as people dispersed to their assigned positions and rest before the long days ahead. Eleanor caught Caleb's arm. "When this is over, when we've won, I want to marry you immediately. No waiting, no big ceremony. Just us and whatever friends remain standing. When we win," he corrected gently. "Not if, when," she agreed. "Promise me something?" "Anything. If it comes down to a choice, the ranch or us, choose us. We can rebuild property. We can't rebuild lives." He cupped her face in his hands. "I promise. The ranch matters, but you matter more. You'll always matter more." They stood together in the darkness, 2 people who'd found each other against all odds, about to fight for the life they'd only just begun to build. Above them, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns, indifferent to human struggles below. But Eleanor didn't feel small beneath that vast sky. She felt part of something larger, part of the land, part of the history of people who'd built lives in hard places. Part of a partnership that might just be strong enough to weather whatever storm was coming. Tomorrow, Pike would learn they'd filed the claim. Tomorrow, the real fight would begin. Tonight, Eleanor and Caleb held each other and drew strength from the simple fact of their presence, their partnership, their stubborn refusal to surrender what they'd fought so hard to claim. The deed to the ranch sat on the table between them, its legal language dry and formal. But Eleanor knew what it truly represented, not just property and water rights, but the foundation of a life built on trust, work, and the kind of love that grows not from ease, but from facing hardship together. She picked up the deed, studied it in the lamplight. Whitmore Ward, the names linked as they should have been generations ago, as they finally were now. "My father would be happy," she said softly, "to see this made right. My grandfather, too." Caleb's hand covered hers on the paper. "We're fixing their mistakes. Building something better, something worth fighting for. Worth everything," he agreed. They sat together as the night deepened, preparing themselves for the battle ahead, drawing courage from each other and from the simple, powerful knowledge that some things, land, water, love, justice, were worth defending at any cost. The fight for Silver Ridge was about to begin. Pike Drummond received the news at his ranch, a sprawling operation that made Eleanor's property look like a homestead. His foreman delivered the message with visible reluctance, knowing how his boss reacted to setbacks. Word spread quickly through Silver Ridge. Eleanor Whitmore and Caleb Ward had filed a legal claim to the water rights with Denver Territorial Office. The claim was valid, documented, and would likely hold up in court. Pike's access to the spring, The water that fed his operation was now in serious jeopardy. Jack Morrison brought this intelligence back to the ranch that evening. Pike's gathering his men, at least 15, maybe more. He's not hiding his intentions. Told everyone in the saloon that he's going to settle this his way since the law won't. When? Caleb asked. Day after tomorrow, most likely. Needs time to get everyone in position. Jack's weathered face was grim. He's not planning a raid, Caleb. He's planning a siege. Means to starve you out or burn you out. Eleanor felt her stomach clench, but kept her voice steady. Then we have one day to prepare. They worked through the night and into the next day. Caleb positioned men at strategic points around the property, places with good sightlines and cover. They stockpiled ammunition at each position, along with water and food. They moved the cattle to the far pasture, away from potential crossfire. Martha prepared medical supplies with practiced efficiency. Bandages, whiskey for cleaning wounds, thread for stitching. You've done this before, Eleanor observed, watching Martha work, more times than I care to count. The frontier isn't gentle, child. You learn to prepare for violence even as you hope for peace. Martha's hands were steady, but her eyes were worried. Your father and I patched up men after range wars, after raids, after disputes that turned bloody. Each time I prayed it would be the last. Eleanor helped her roll bandages, thinking about her father facing these same dangers, these same hard choices. Had he been afraid? Had he questioned whether the land was worth the cost? She wished she could ask him, could hear his voice offering wisdom or comfort, but she had Martha and Caleb, and the knowledge that her father had ultimately succeeded. He'd built something lasting. She and Caleb would do the same. By evening of the preparation day, they'd done everything they could. Defensive positions established, supplies distributed, plans communicated. Now there was nothing to do but wait. Eleanor found Caleb checking the fence line near the house, testing each post with methodical thoroughness. She stood beside him, letting the familiar sounds of the ranch settle around them. Wind through grass. A cattle lowing in the distance, the creek running clear and strong. I need to tell you something, Eleanor said quietly. While we still have time, he turned to her, waiting. When I came here, I was running away. From Boston, from expectations, from a life that felt like it was suffocating me. I told myself I was honoring my father's memory, but really I was just escaping. She met his eyes. But somewhere along the way, I stopped running and started building, started living instead of just existing. You gave me that, Caleb, this partnership, this work, this love. You gave me my life back. He pulled her close, his arms strong and sure around her. You gave me mine too. After Sarah and Anna died, I was just going through motions. Surviving but not living. Then you arrived with your stubborn Eastern ways and your refusal to quit, and you reminded me what it feels like to care about something again, to want something beyond just making it to the next day. They stood together as the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of fire and gold. Eleanor thought about the last time she'd held her mother's cameo, how wearing it had felt like carrying someone else's expectations. She thought about the silk dresses still packed in her trunk, never worn since her arrival. She thought about the woman she'd been in Boston and the woman she'd become here. No regrets? Caleb asked softly. Not a single one. That night they gathered everyone in the house for a final meeting. 11 people total, counting Martha, against Pike's 15 or more. Poor odds, but not impossible. Pike will come tomorrow, Caleb said, studying faces around the room. He'll try to intimidate us first, offer terms that sound reasonable but really aren't. When we refuse, he'll attack. His men are experienced. Some are hired guns, not just ranch hands. They'll be organized and ruthless. What's our advantage? Tom Morrison asked. He was young, barely into his 20s, but steady and brave. We're defending, not attacking. We know the land. We're fighting for something that matters, while they're just following orders. Caleb pointed to the map. And we have better positions. If we're smart, if we hold our ground, we can make it costly enough that Pike decides the water isn't worth the price. What if he doesn't? One of the southern ranchers asked. What if he's willing to pay any price? Then we make him pay until he can't afford it anymore. Eleanor spoke with more confidence than she felt. Pike's a businessman. He'll calculate costs and benefits. Our job is to make the costs unbearable. They reviewed positions one more time, went over contingencies and signals. Then, because there was nothing more to do, they tried to rest. Some people slept, others sat quietly, checking weapons or writing letters to loved ones, just in case Eleanor couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch with her father's journal, reading his entries by lamplight. He'd written about building the ranch, about hard seasons and small victories, about believing in something even when circumstances argued against it. One entry, dated years before her arrival, caught her attention. "Today I watched the sun set over the mountains and thought about Eleanor. She's finding her way in Boston society, making her mother proud. But I wonder if she's happy, truly happy, or just playing the role expected of her. I hope someday she'll come here, see this land I love, understand why I chose it over comfort and convention. I hope she'll find the courage to choose her own path, whatever that may be." Tears blurred Eleanor's vision. He'd known. Her father had known she was living someone else's life, and he'd hoped, he'd believed she could find her way to something truer. "You found me," she whispered to the night, to his memory. "And I found myself." Caleb emerged from the house, sat beside her. He didn't ask what she was reading, didn't intrude on her moment. Just sat close, his presence steady and comforting. "Tell me about tomorrow," Eleanor said. "Honestly, what do you think will happen?" "Honestly, I think Pike will offer us one last chance to surrender. We'll refuse. Then there'll be gunfire, probably lasting most of the day. Some people might get hurt. Some might die." He paused. "But I also think we'll win. Not because we're better shots or have superior numbers, but because we won't quit. And eventually Pike will. You sound certain. I am certain. About this, about you, about us." He took her hand, traced the ring on her finger, his grandmother's ring, now hers. "After tomorrow, when this is done, I want to marry you. Not just legally, but really. Stand up in front of everyone who helped us and make promises that mean something. I want that too." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder. "I want to build a life here, raise children who understand both the hardship and the beauty of this place. I want to grow old with you, watching seasons change, watching the ranch become something lasting. We'll do all that," Caleb promised. "After tomorrow." They sat together through the night, sometimes talking, sometimes silent, drawing strength from each other as the hours crept toward dawn. Around them, the ranch was quiet but alert, like a held breath waiting to be released. At first light, Martha made coffee and a large breakfast. "Eat," she commanded. "You'll need strength for what's coming." They ate, though food tasted like ash in Eleanor's mouth. Then they moved to positions, checking weapons one final time, settling in to wait. The sun climbed higher. Morning stretched into midday. Tension built with every passing hour, every moment. Pike didn't arrive, building anxiety like a gathering storm. Then, just past noon, someone called out, "Riders coming!" Eleanor moved to her position near the house, rifle ready. From here, she had a clear view of the main approach. She could see the dust cloud first, then the riders. 15 men, well-armed, moving with military precision. At their head rode Pike Drummond himself. Eleanor had never met him, but she recognized the confidence in his bearing, the assumption that the world would bend to his will. He was 50, powerfully built, with iron-gray hair and the face of a man used to winning. The riders stopped just outside rifle range. Pike raised one hand, signaling for a parley. "That's our cue," Caleb said. He and Eleanor walked out to meet Pike, staying within easy retreat distance of the house. Pike studied them both with calculating eyes. "Miss Whitmore, Mr. Ward, I understand congratulations are in order. Engagement, I hear. News travels fast," Eleanor said evenly. "It's a small territory. People talk." Pike shifted in his saddle, leather creaking. "I've come to make you a final offer. A generous one, considering the circumstances. We're not interested in selling," Caleb said. "You haven't heard the terms yet." Pike smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll purchase the Whitmore Ranch for twice its assessed value. You keep your mountain property, Ward, and I'll guarantee water access through an easement. In writing, legally binding. Miss Whitmore returns to whatever life she had back east, and everyone walks away happy. Except the water rights belong to us, Eleanor said. Legally, completely. You have no claim. Legal claims can be disputed, appealed, tied up in courts for years. Pike leaned forward. I have resources, Miss Whitmore. I can make this fight last longer than your money will hold out, longer than your friend's courage will last. He gestured magnanimously. You can take my generous offer and end this now. Eleanor felt Caleb tense beside her, but kept her own voice calm. We're not leaving. The water is ours, the land is ours, and no amount of money or threats will change that. Pike's expression hardened. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. Disappointing, but not unexpected. He straightened in his saddle. You have until sunset to reconsider. After that, my men will take possession of the property by whatever means necessary. Any resistance will be met with appropriate force. This is our land, Caleb said quietly, dangerously. You're welcome to try taking it. But understand, it won't be easy and it won't be cheap. Pike studied Caleb for a long moment. You're serious about this? About fighting for a piece of land that's barely profitable, for a woman who'll probably leave when she realizes how hard frontier life really is. I'm not leaving, Eleanor said firmly. And yes, we're serious. Then you're fools. Pike gathered his reins. Sunset, Miss Whitmore. Choose wisely. He wheeled his horse and rode back to his men. They withdrew to a ridgeline about a half-mile distant, just far enough to be out of rifle range, but close enough to watch. Eleanor and Caleb returned to the house, where everyone waited anxiously. He gave us until sunset, Eleanor reported. Then he attacks. That gives us maybe 5 hours, Jack calculated. Time to rest, eat, make peace with whatever gods we believe in. The afternoon crawled by. Eleanor made rounds to each defensive position, bringing water, checking supplies, offering words of encouragement. These people were risking everything for her fight, for her ranch, for the principle that bullies like Pike shouldn't win. At the position held by Sarah Hendricks, Eleanor paused. You don't have to stay. You have children at home. Sarah checked her rifle with practiced ease. My children need to grow up in a world where people like Pike don't get to take whatever they want. If I run now, I'm teaching them to be cowards. Better they learn to stand up, even when it's hard. Eleanor gripped her shoulder, too moved to speak. At the far position, Tom Morrison cleaned his rifle nervously. Miss Whitmore? I've never shot at a person before. Don't know if I can. If it comes to it, aim to defend yourself and others. Don't think about who you're shooting at. Think about who you're protecting. She paused. And Tom, it's all right to be scared. Courage isn't not feeling fear. It's acting despite the fear. He nodded, looking slightly reassured. As the sun began its descent toward the western peaks, Eleanor returned to the house. She found Caleb in her father's study, looking at the books, the papers, the accumulated evidence of a life built in hard country. Whatever happens today, Eleanor said softly, I want you to know this has been the best time of my life. These months with you, building something real, being truly myself, I wouldn't trade them for anything. Caleb turned to her, pulled her close. This isn't goodbye, Eleanor. We're going to win. We're going to have years together, decades. Time to build everything we've talked about. Promise me something anyway. Anything. If something happens to me, Eleanor. Please, listen. She held his face in her hands. If something happens to me, don't retreat back into the mountains. Don't let grief win again. Keep the ranch going. Honor what we started. Live fully. Promise me. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. I promise. But only if you promise the same. If something happens to me, you keep fighting. Keep building. Don't give up on this life we've chosen. I promise. They kissed, deep and claiming, as if they could seal their promises with that connection. Then Martha called from the porch, They're moving! The sun touched the mountain peaks, painting the sky in crimson and gold. From the ridgeline, Pike's men began to ride forward, spreading out in a practiced formation designed to surround the property. Eleanor took her position near the house, Caleb beside her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her palms were slick with sweat, but her hands on the rifle were steady. This was it. Everything they'd fought for, everything they'd built, everything they loved. It all came down to the next few hours. The riders drew closer. Eleanor could see their faces now, grim and determined. She recognized some from town, men who'd worked for Pike for years, men who followed orders without question. Caleb raised his voice, projecting across the distance. "Last warning! This is private property, legally owned. Turn back now and there's no trouble." Pike's voice came back hard and unforgiving. "Take the ranch, boys. Use whatever force necessary." The first shots rang out as the sun disappeared behind the mountains, and the battle for Silver Ridge began. The aftermath of battle revealed itself in harsh morning light. The barn smoldered, half destroyed by fire. The fence line was torn apart by gunfire and trampling horses. Empty shell casings littered the ground like brass seeds. And people, friends who'd stood with them, sat exhausted, bleeding but alive. Marshal Hayes organized his deputies to collect statements and document the scene. "This'll go to trial," he told Eleanor and Caleb. "Pike will fight the charges, use his money and connections. But with this many witnesses, this much evidence, I think justice will actually prevail." "How long until trial?" Caleb asked. 3 months, maybe 4. "You'll need to testify in Denver." Hayes surveyed the damage. "In the meantime, you've got a ranch to rebuild. Again." After Hayes departed with Pike in custody, Eleanor stood in the middle of the yard and took inventory. The barn was a loss. They'd have to tear down what remained and start over. The fences needed complete replacement in several sections. They'd burned through ammunition and supplies they couldn't easily afford to replace, but they were alive. They'd won. The water rights were secured, the land was theirs, and Pike Drummond was facing territorial justice. Martha emerged from the house with fresh bandages and hot coffee. "Stop standing around looking stunned, and help me tend the wounded. We've got work to do." Eleanor helped Martha treat injuries. Tom Morrison's shoulder wound properly cleaned and stitched. Jack's cuts bandaged. Smaller injuries tended with careful attention. Everyone was exhausted, running on adrenaline and relief. "You should rest," Eleanor told Sarah Hendricks as she wrapped the woman's sprained wrist. "Rest later. First I need to check on my children." Sarah stood carefully, testing her balance. "Thank you, Eleanor, for standing up to Pike, for giving the rest of us courage to stand, too. We couldn't have done it without you." Without everyone. One by one, the defenders prepared to leave. Jack and Tom Morrison, Sarah, the southern ranchers, all heading back to their own properties, their own responsibilities. But before they left, they gathered in the yard for a moment Eleanor would remember for the rest of her life. Jack spoke for all of them. "What happened here? It matters beyond this ranch. You showed that bullies like Pike can be beaten. That standing up for what's right actually works, if enough people have the courage." He extended his hand to Eleanor, then to Caleb. "You're good neighbors, good people. If you need anything, rebuilding help, supplies, just company, you send word." After they left, the ranch felt suddenly empty. Just Eleanor, Caleb, and Martha standing in the ruins of their victory. "I need to check on my father's Bible," Eleanor said, suddenly remembering. During the fight, she'd kept it in her pocket. Some superstitious hope it might protect her, the way it had protected soldiers in old stories. She retrieved it from the house, opened it to find the pages intact, but pressed between them. The wildflower Caleb had shown her weeks ago. The pressed lupine, fragile and perfect, had survived the battle in the folds of Scripture. "Look," she showed Caleb. It made it through. He touched the flower gently. "Some beautiful things are tougher than they look." They walked together to the creek, needing the sound of flowing water, needing to see the thing they'd fought so hard to protect. The water ran clear and strong, oblivious to human struggles, continuing its ancient path from mountain heights to thirsty valleys below. Caleb pulled something from his pocket, his grandfather's watch, the one he'd shown her weeks ago. He opened it, studied the time, then held it out to Eleanor. "This watch represents my family's history here. The time my grandfather spent building something, the years my father wasted in bitterness, the years I spent hiding from life." He closed it carefully. "I want to give it to our children someday. Tell them about the generations that came before, the mistakes we learned from, the things we did right." Eleanor's throat tightened. "Our children, if you'll still have me, if you haven't reconsidered after seeing how hard this life really is." She looked at him, dusty, exhausted, beautiful in the morning light. This man who'd saved her life, taught her to survive, shown her what partnership truly meant. I haven't reconsidered. I want this life. I want you. I want to build something lasting here. He pulled her close, held her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Then let's get married. Today, if we can. Tomorrow at the latest. No more waiting, no more delays. Martha! Eleanor called toward the house. Can you ride to town? We need a minister. Martha appeared in the doorway already, tying on her bonnet. I thought you'd never ask. Give me 2 hours. While Martha rode to Silver Ridge, Eleanor and Caleb began the immediate cleanup. They put out the last smoldering sections of barn. They moved wounded horses to shelter. They collected weapons and stored them carefully away. Simple tasks that needed doing, made meaningful by the fact that they were doing them together, building toward a shared future. Martha returned in less than 2 hours with not just the minister, but half the town. News of the battle had spread quickly, and people came to see for themselves, to offer help, to witness what happened when someone actually stood up to Pike Drummond. Margaret Chen brought food. The shopkeeper brought lumber and nails. On credit. Pay when you can. Samuel Garrett conspicuously didn't come, but Eleanor noticed his bank was suddenly silent about the ranch's debts. The minister, Reverend Thomas, was the same practical man they'd met in Denver. He took in the damage, the exhausted defenders, the couple standing determined in the middle of it all, and smiled. Well, you two certainly know how to make an entrance into married life. Most couples start with a nice ceremony and work their way up to battles. You've done it backward. We're not a conventional couple, Eleanor said. I can see that. He opened his book of services. Where would you like to do this? Eleanor looked at Caleb. The creek. The creek, he agreed. They gathered at the water's edge. Eleanor and Caleb, Martha and the minister, and the townspeople who'd come to witness. Eleanor wore her work clothes, dusty and worn. Caleb wore his usual rough garments. Neither had taken time to clean up properly, and Eleanor couldn't have cared less. Reverend Thomas kept the ceremony brief and meaningful. Marriage in the frontier isn't like marriage elsewhere. Out here, you rely on each other for survival, for sanity, for everything that makes life worth living. The vows you take today aren't just about love, though that's clear enough between you. They're about partnership in the truest sense. About facing hardship together and building something that lasts. He asked the traditional questions. Eleanor and Caleb gave the traditional answers. But when it came time for additional vows, Caleb spoke from the heart. Eleanor, you came here lost and found yourself. You taught me that it's possible to start over, to risk caring again, to believe in futures instead of just surviving presents. I promise to be your partner in everything, in work, in struggle, in whatever joy we can build together. I promise to see you, really see you every day for the rest of our lives. Eleanor's voice shook but held steady. Caleb, you showed me what it means to live authentically, to work for something that matters, to love without reservation. You gave me the courage to choose my own path, and I choose you. I promise to stand beside you, to fight for what we're building, to never give up on us, even when things are hard. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your home. By the authority vested in me by the territory, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may seal this union with a kiss. They kissed as the creek flowed beside them, as the mountains watched from their ancient heights, as their friends cheered and Martha wiped away tears. It wasn't a fancy wedding. There were no silk dresses or formal wear, no elaborate ceremony or reception. But it was real and true and theirs. After the kiss, after the congratulations, Margaret Chen stepped forward with a small package. "Wedding present," she said, handing it to Eleanor. "From all of us in town." Inside was a brand-new branding iron, custom-made. The design combined their initials in an elegant interweaving pattern, E&C, Whitmore and Ward, forever linked. "For your cattle," Margaret explained. "For your legacy. For whatever you build here together." Eleanor held the iron, feeling its weight, its promise. "Thank you, all of you, for standing with us, for believing in us. You gave us courage to stand up to Pike," the shopkeeper said. "That's worth more than any iron, though the iron's pretty nice too." As evening fell, people gradually departed. Martha prepared a celebratory dinner from the supplies Margaret had brought. Nothing fancy, but abundant and made with love. They ate on the porch as stars emerged, talking about the future, about rebuilding, about the trial in Denver, and what would come after. "We'll need to start the barn rebuild immediately," Caleb said. "Can't go into winter without proper shelter for livestock. And the fences," Eleanor added. "Though maybe we should consider stone walls in some sections. More permanent, harder to cut. More expensive," Caleb countered. "But you're right. Might be worth the investment." They planned and dreamed, two people building a life from determination and love and the shared belief that some things were worth fighting for. Martha listened with a smile, occasionally offering wisdom born from decades of frontier living. Finally, Martha stood and stretched. "I'm going to bed. You two should do the same. Tomorrow starts the real work." After she went inside, Eleanor and Caleb sat together in comfortable silence. Eleanor thought about the journey that had brought her here, from Boston society to frontier ranch, from engagement to a man she didn't love to marriage with one she loved completely, from uncertainty to purpose. "Do you think we'll make it?" she asked. "Long term, I mean. Build something that lasts." "I think we already have," Caleb said. "We've built a partnership based on honesty and trust. We've built friendships with people who'll stand with us when things get hard. We've built a life that's ours, not borrowed from others' expectations." He took her hand. "The ranch, the buildings and fences and cattle, that's all just details. What matters is this. You and me choosing each other, choosing this life." Eleanor leaned against his shoulder, feeling the solid warmth of him, the steady beat of his heart. "I love you, Caleb Ward, today, tomorrow, for whatever time we have. I love you too, Eleanor Ward." He kissed the top of her head. "Welcome home." They sat together as the night deepened. Two people who'd fought for their right to choose their own destiny, who'd won against odds and expectations, who'd begun building something that would outlast them both. The ranch would need rebuilding. Winter would test them. The trial would be difficult, but they'd face it all together, partners in the truest sense, building a legacy not of wealth or social standing, but of courage, love, and the stubborn determination to live authentically. Above them, stars wheeled in their eternal dance. Below them, water flowed where it should, reclaimed and protected. And between heaven and earth, Eleanor and Caleb Ward began their married life in a home built from hope, defended by courage, and secured by love that could weather any storm. The battle was over. The future had just begun. 3 months had passed since the battle, since the wedding, since Pike Drummond rode away in chains. Autumn had painted the mountains in shades of gold and crimson, and now winter approached with the promise of the hardship Caleb had warned about. But the ranch was ready. The new barn stood strong and straight, built not just by Caleb and Eleanor, but by neighbors who'd helped in the rebuilding. It was larger than the old one, better designed, with a stone foundation that would last generations. Inside, 6 horses and 20 head of cattle waited out the approaching winter in warm shelter. The fences were repaired, many sections now reinforced with stone, as Eleanor had suggested. Supplies were stockpiled, food, ammunition, winter fodder for the animals. The house had been weatherproofed, windows sealed, the roof patched where bullets had torn through. Eleanor stood on the porch in the early morning cold, watching her breath mist in the air. She wore practical wool and leather now, her eastern silks packed away as memories of a different life. Her hands were calloused, her skin weathered by sun and wind. She looked like she belonged to this land because she did. Caleb emerged from the barn, saw her on the porch, and smiled, that full, open smile she'd worked so hard to earn. He climbed the steps and pulled her close, both of them bundled against the cold. "Checking the sky?" he asked. "Wondering when the first real snow will hit. Soon, another week, maybe less." He kissed her forehead. "We're ready, though. Better prepared than most folks for their first winter together," Eleanor laughed. "Most folks don't spend their honeymoon rebuilding a ranch and preparing for trial." The trial. That had been 2 weeks ago in Denver. They testified about Pike's attempted land grab, about the battle, about the documented water rights. Pike's lawyers had argued and postured, but the evidence was overwhelming. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Pike guilty on all charges. He'd been sentenced to 5 years in territorial prison and ordered to pay restitution for damages. His ranch had been sold to cover the debts, the water rights permanently secured to the Whitmore Ward property. Samuel Garrett, implicated in Pike's schemes, had quietly left Silver Ridge. The bank had new management now, people who dealt fairly. "I got a letter from Harrison Brooks yesterday," Eleanor said. "He's officially filed our partnership papers with the territory. The Whitmore Ward Ranch is now a legal entity, with both our names on all the documents. Equal partners, in everything," Martha called from inside. "Breakfast is getting cold." They went in to find her laying out eggs and biscuits, coffee steaming in heavy mugs. Martha had stayed on not as housekeeper, but as family, the wisdom they relied on, the connection to their father's generation, the grandmother their future children would need. "Jack Morrison stopped by earlier," Martha said. "Wanted you to know he and Tom will be heading to Denver next month. Asked if you need anything from the city." "We should make a list," Eleanor said. "Seeds for spring planting. Some books. Maybe fabric for—" She stopped, blushed slightly. Caleb's eyes widened. "Eleanor? Are you saying—" "I'm saying maybe. It's early yet, and I'm not certain, but maybe." Martha whooped with joy. Caleb pulled Eleanor into his arms, held her as if she were made of glass. "You're sure?" "Not completely. But I have certain suspicions." Eleanor touched her belly through the layers of wool. "I was going to wait to tell you until I was certain, but nothing." "This is wonderful." Caleb's face shone with hope and fear in equal measure. "We'll need to be careful. Winter is hard on expecting mothers. We'll need to keep living," Eleanor interrupted gently. "I'm not fragile, Caleb. Women have been having babies in frontier conditions since there's been a frontier. Doesn't mean I have to like the risks." "No," she agreed, "but it means we face them together, like everything else." After breakfast, they rode out to check the high pastures one final time before winter sealed them in. The ride took them past the spring, their spring legally protected now, where water bubbled up clear and cold. They stopped to let the horses drink, and Eleanor dismounted to fill her canteen. "I want to bring our child here someday," she said. "Show them where we fought for their future, where we secured what they'll inherit. They want them to understand that some things are worth defending. They'll understand because we'll teach them. About their grandfathers who were stubborn and proud. About their grandmothers who were strong. About all the people who built lives in hard places and refused to quit." They continued to Caleb's cabin, which they visited regularly now. It served as a retreat, a place to escape when ranch demands became overwhelming. Inside, little had changed, still simple, still sparse, but now there were signs of Eleanor's presence too. Her books on the shelves beside his, her clothes hanging next to his. The carved wooden horse now rested on a higher shelf, honored and safe. "I've been thinking," Caleb said as they shared lunch in the cabin, "about expanding the house down at the ranch, adding rooms for the children we hope to have, maybe a proper study where you can keep the accounts and correspondence, and a room for Martha so she doesn't have to climb stairs in winter." They planned together, dreaming of the life they were building. Not the life others had expected for them, but the one they'd chosen: hard work and simple joys, partnership and love, connection to land and community. As they prepared to return to the ranch, Eleanor noticed something tucked into one of Caleb's books, a letter worn from repeated reading. She recognized the handwriting before she saw the signature, her father's letter, the one that had started everything. "You kept it," she said softly. "Read it sometimes when I need reminding of why we're doing this, of what your father hoped we could build together." Caleb took the letter, held it carefully. "He was right, you know, about you finding yourself here, about me finding peace, about us making something better than what our fathers managed. I wish he could see it. See us. Maybe he can." Caleb looked out the window at the mountains, the endless sky. "Maybe Sarah and Anna can too. Maybe everyone we've lost watches and approves of the lives we're building from the ruins of grief." They rode home as the sun began its descent, painting the world in shades of gold. At the ranch, smoke rose from the chimney where Martha was cooking dinner. Cattle moved peacefully in their pasture. The barn stood strong against the coming winter. Water flowed where it should, protected and shared, as it always should have been. Eleanor dismounted and stood for a moment, just taking it in. This life, this place, this partnership she'd fought so hard to claim. Caleb came to stand beside her. Regrets? Not a single one. She turned to him, rose on her toes to kiss him. I came here running from a life that didn't fit. I found one that does. I found you. I found myself. We found each other. They walked to the house together. The brand new iron above the door, gleaming in the last light, their combined initials, their shared legacy, their proof that some partnerships were worth fighting for. Inside, Martha had dinner ready and a fire burning bright. They ate together, the three of them, talking about tomorrow's tasks and next season's plans and the child that might be growing even now, the next generation of this life they were building. Later, as Eleanor and Caleb prepared for bed, she caught sight of herself in the mirror. She barely recognized the woman looking back, sun-browned, work-hardened, eyes bright with purpose and contentment. Not the refined Eastern lady who'd arrived months ago, but someone stronger, truer, more herself than she'd ever been. She removed her mother's cameo from the jewelry box where it rested, held it for a moment. Then she pinned it carefully to a ribbon and hung it on the wall, not abandoned, but transformed. A reminder of where she'd come from, honored but not defining who she'd become. Caleb came to stand behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and they looked at their reflection together. Rough and weathered, yes, but real. Authentic in a way society photographs could never capture. I love you, she said simply. I love you too. Today, tomorrow, through whatever winters come. They climbed into bed as wind picked up outside, carrying the scent of coming snow. Eleanor nestled against Caleb's warmth, his arms secure around her, and felt the deep contentment of being exactly where she belonged. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall, dusting the mountains in white. The ranch settled into winter sleep, protected and prepared. Water flowed beneath forming ice, patient and persistent, knowing spring would come again. And inside the house her father built, in the arms of the man she'd chosen, Eleanor Ward drifted into sleep with a smile on her face and hope in her heart. Sometimes the person you need most in life is the one you'd never think to look for. Sometimes love finds you in the last place you'd expect, in rough hands, a quiet heart, and a land that asks everything of you. Eleanor had found all of that and more. She'd found home, not in a place but in partnership, in purpose, in the daily choice to build something real with someone real. The mountains would test them. Winter would challenge them. Life would bring hardships yet undreamed of, but they'd face it all together. Equal partners in the life they'd fought to claim. Bound by love that couldn't be tamed, it could only be earned day by day. Through honesty and work and the stubborn refusal to give up on each other or the dreams they shared. The future stretched ahead, uncertain but promising. And Eleanor Ward, formerly of Boston, now of Silver Ridge, faced it with courage, with love, and with the unshakable knowledge that she'd finally found where she belonged. Home.